Welcome to the Fly Culture Podcast, bringing you interviews, reviews and fishing tips. Here's your host, Pete Tygers.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Fly Culture Podcast. My name is Pete Tygers, and I hope you've been enjoying these during lockdown and even before then as well. Lots of things happening for us at the moment as well, so keep an eye out on our social media channels, and if you do find us out there, that would be really cool. We really appreciate the support for both the magazine and the podcast. It's been quite overwhelming, so I've been really, really pleased with it, and thank you so much for that. My guest today, I first met Jon Ogborne via the online magazine I used to run called Eat, Sleep, Fish. We fished his local stream just outside Bristol, caught a few, and finished the day with some fine banana bread he'd baked. On embarking the journey with Fly Culture, I knew I had to try and secure his design skills to help bring the magazine to life. I'm pleased he agreed, and he has helped make Fly Culture what it is today. He's also a passionate angler who lives to fish the Welsh Llynns of Wales and lochs of Scotland and the lakes around Bristol, along with many trout streams too. I thought it would be fun for you to meet a member of Fly Culture who has a fascinating fishing CV. Jon, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, thanks, man. Yeah, I'm doing good. Yeah. I feel like I'm trapped in a little bit of a Groundhog Day scenario, but, you know, I mean, the winter can be a bit like that anyway. And, like, about this time of year, my mind's all over Scotland, Wales. Just can't wait to get at it, you know. But yeah, no, I'm doing good. Doing good.
And we'll delve into that at some stage. But I guess a lot has happened since we first fished and ate that magnificent banana bread together as well, hasn't it?
Oh, man, really has. Yeah, I mean, what a journey. Yeah, it's just been incredible. I mean, both in terms of fishing, but obviously with Fly Culture, it's just been incredible. It's been brilliant.
I still remember that day really, really fondly. And I know I showed you some dark stuff on your stream, but it was throwing streamers on a 2-weight was kind of interesting, but it was really fascinating seeing that a stream just outside a major city, really, that's going about doing its thing, even had grayling in as well, and it's a fabulous little stream, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible. And I still, you know, when I'm there, I still have to kind of pinch myself, really. You know, that it's, if I do an early morning session, which I got into the habit of doing when my kids were little, so I'd be back on duty by 10. You know, if I left at 5:30 or something, I'd be there in 20 minutes, you know, and I'd be fishing in half an hour. And it's just lovely. And I mean, what I love about it is it's kind of unpretentious and kind of quite modest. In terms of it's, you know, you've got your dog walkers, you've got, particularly during the pandemic, when before lockdown, you've got kids on rope swings, kind of swimming in the deeper pools. You know, you regularly get poached once a year by the same people. And it's, you know, there's no pretensions to it. And but yet it's just such a gem. I mean, it's beautiful ranunculus, you know, a decent mayfly hatch, and you know, we've stopped stocking it, so we're trying to encourage the resident wild trout population to grow. And as you say, there's a good head of grayling. There's some don't come across them so much these days, but there's some chub and some roach, and occasionally the old carp will crop up. So, you know, it's a really, really lovely stream. And then the otters have come back. There's water voles. There's kingfishers. I mean, you know, within 20 minutes of my house. It's just, I can't believe it, really. It's fantastic.
Well, all I was going to say was that stream, as you say, has everything. And it's those unsung heroes that are the real stars in my book as well, that I kind of like those places that people don't know so much about. And I know we've got the Wild Trout Trust auction coming up, and it's wonderful that it raises money for such a great cause. But when I look at it, I always look at those ones near the back and the little unknown streams and try and get on those ones, because they're the ones that, for me at least, I find absolutely fascinating. And, you know, that stream comes under that as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, when I joined it, I mean, you know, thank goodness for the internet, because it was down to about 20 members, I think. It was very much a local club, but it had been a course fishing club back through the 60s and 70s. But one of about halfway up the beats, was a big weir that was broken down and completely changed the nature of the river, and it became much more suitable for trout and grayling. But the actual membership had sort of diminished over the years, and one of the members of the club had built a fairly rudimentary website, but actually I and a number of other people found it. And, within a couple of years, the membership was right back up to full capacity. And I think since then, there's been a waiting list for sort of 5 or 6 years. So, I just, the day I clicked on that link, I'm always grateful for that. It's great. Great little river.
And I remember the grayling there, and I remember sitting on one grayling until I could catch it. And that's an added bonus as well. And does that allow you to actually fish for them in the winter too?
Well, it does. But to be honest with you, Pete, I'll never forget that fish, actually. I think you went through your entire fly box before you got it. It really taught me something in terms of just hanging in there and just keep putting the fly and keep changing the fly. Because I would have given up about 20 minutes before you. But you can fish during the winter, which I tend to have like 1 or 2 trips up there during the winter, and there'll be a big kind of social element to that. It'll be just getting together with someone for a kind of cup of tea and a chat and a little bit of fishing. But I still really enjoy the close season. I'm like really Mr. Delayed Gratification. I kind of love the sense of waiting and, and the snowdrops coming out and then all the little signs that we're getting near to the start of the trout season. I really enjoy that. And I feel a little bit like, if I fish too much during the winter, I chip away at that anticipation. So I'm quite happy really to hang up my rods and, I'm being self-employed as well because I fish so much during the spring and summer. At some point I've got to earn some money. So I tend to get my head down in the winter and kind of make sure I can afford to fish in the summer and, the autumn and the spring.
That's a really interesting view of not fishing during the winter. And I've sort of kind of tried it. And obviously we're here as well, dictated by weather conditions and how big the rivers have been. And we've been getting these wet winters, so you missed it. But this one's been a really interesting one, not being able to fish full stop, i.e. not having a grayling river near enough to me, has made it kind of interesting. And although it's been a chance to have a breather and to reset, not being able to do it has made it that little bit more difficult. I have to say personally that, I'd miss fishing. Even if I fished 50, 70 days over the winter, I'm still as excited come trout season when that comes. But, we start salmon on 1st of March. I can get to the river there without breaking any rules. God, I'm going to fish like a maniac. I'm going to fish terribly. Even if the river's huge, I'll be there in some way, shape or form just to mark it. I really do miss it. I bought some new wading boots the other day and I walked around the bedroom in my waders and wading boots just to check they fitted all okay. It's ridiculous, really, isn't it? I'm old enough to know better.
But isn't that what we're fishing is all about, searching for that? I remember when I was a teenager, we had this shop in Bristol called Paradise Garage that sold George Cox creepers, and I remember buying my first pair and I was so into these shoes, I almost wore them to bed, I was so excited about it. And it's that kind of Christmas feeling. And still, it's always kind of like a journey to try and get that again. And fishing's like a kind of a quick access to that, isn't it? That feeling before you've got you head off at 5 a.m. on a trip, or it's that it's all about that kind of that almost the boyhood feeling, that excitement. And I was sort of thinking about key moments for me in my kind of fishing career, if you will. And some of them have been like the most simple times. I can remember fishing literally a man-made culvert in a housing estate, which had some little chublets in a pipe with Jack, my son, when he was about 5. We just had the top section of a fly rod with a bit of bread on it, and that just remains with me as one of my kind of all-time fishing highs. And I think probably because it came close to that kind of excitement that you have when you're younger, and I think we're continually searching for that.
And I think as well, it's all the things that go with it. And it's funny enough, while you were saying that, it made me think of fly culture in that sense, that we look at that bigger picture of it. And as I've said on here a number of times already, that I'm just not interested in tying any flies at all for some reason. I couldn't tell you why it is. I just don't. And I've been buying flies from friends, and I've got some new fly boxes coming, and I'm really looking forward to sorting out the fly boxes and all those little things that go with it, getting prepared, as you say, for the new season. And that's part of it, isn't it? It is that bigger picture of everything, isn't it?
Well, isn't it just? I mean, I think, the anticipation sometimes is even better than the event, or, at least as good as. I mean, one of my favourite things is just going, when we've decided where we're going on our big trip for the year, is going out and buying the map. That feels like the real first step, and then just spreading it out and looking at all the possibilities. I mean, I've got a big map here just pinned to the picture rail of Scotland at the minute, and I'm, kind of desperately trying to get on my work, but my eyes keep kind of drifting up and looking at all the places that, could be on the agenda. So I think that sense of anticipation is just fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah.
I think
I saw your maps on the wall on your social media, and that planning aspect of it. And when you come to the planning, do you sort of, and say it looks and sounds very much like you're going to Scotland, does that mean that you will drive to Scotland and fish? Or does it mean, because I've been thinking about this a little bit, Emma and I have talked about doing some sort of tour, and do you fish somewhere en route, or do you just head down and get to your destination?
Oh no, for me, it's like very much about the whole trip. Definitely. I mean, one of my favourite points is just setting off in the morning with the car loaded up, picking up my buddy who lives sort of a couple of streets away, and then getting on the M5. I mean, I love all of that. Hopefully up to Penrith for about 11 for a bit of sort of brunch and a wander around John Norris, pick up some few last bits and pieces. And then normally if we're going to Scotland, we'll stop off. Last year we fished the Clyde for the afternoon. It was only about 3 or 4 hours, but, it was just great to be there. This time I think we're going to try the Emont, and then we'll stay off in Glasgow. And then, I mean, it's a heck of a long, we're going up to Orkney this year, so it's a big old drive up from Glasgow. But the whole trip, it's something, I mean, obviously, after the event on the way home, it's not quite as exciting, but certainly on the way up is really part of it, definitely.
Yeah, we'd do the same when we were going to the Devon, and we'd stay somewhere in Yorkshire or the lakes or whatever overnight, and then drive, because like you say, once you get past Glasgow, it's still a long drive up to Banff from there. But we'd do the same, have a wander around John Norris, go in the shop across the road there, have a bit of tea and cake and everything that went with it. And that is part of it. But like you say, the journey back's kind of interesting, that your head's down, and we'd do it in one go. And it's like 11 hours doing shifts, and so you'd close your eyes for a couple of hours while Emma drove, and I'd do the same and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's different. It's funny that on a trip, I was just thinking about it then, is there a stage where you start thinking, because that first day, isn't it, is just off the dial with excitement. And then you get into a rhythm, don't you? And, it might even be, and it sounds like you're the same when I fish with friends on road trips, that you have your own side of the car or whatever it is where your kit is, so you know where everything is, and you get into that nice rhythm of how things work. And then it's almost sort of, it goes so quickly, doesn't it, that it almost feels like the sands are falling through the hourglass really, really quickly. And then you start thinking, particularly when you're there, I've got the drive tomorrow or whatever it is, and I desperately try to eke every last second out of the fishing. Are you similar in that sense of the rhythm of it and how the trip plays out?
Absolutely, but I think probably as much out of necessity as anything else, because at our age, I don't know if you're anything like me, but unless I've got a routine, particularly with getting ready for a fishing trip, I'll forget something, And if you're on a lock all day and relying on an electric motor, if you forget to charge the motor, that should, that's going to cause a big problem the next day. So there's definitely a rhythm. But, one of the nicest moments of the day is when you get in, if you're fishing up in Scotland, you can be fishing till couple of years ago on South Uist, we were there on fishing at midnight. It was incredible. It's like, again, that was just a real highlight. Catching fish too at midnight. But, that moment when you come in about 9 o'clock, someone's turn to cook the dinner, crack open a beer and all that kind of stuff. And there, like you say, there is a natural rhythm to the trip, which is just fantastic. It's amazing. And I think what we've done to kind of counteract that, the looming journey back is we put Malham Tarn in as a kind of stop off to bring us down. It's our kind of methadone to get us back to normal life. And actually, I mean, some of the best fishing has been in Malham anyway. So it's just, and then you get into your office when you're back at work, and you can, if you've been in a boat for a week drifting on those locks, you can still feel the boat moving. It's incredible. It's like a lovely little reminder of what's just been. So definitely, there's definitely a rhythm and a routine to it.
It was interesting what you were saying about the trip and catching fish at midnight. And I think those ones are probably past me now. But I was thinking about my buddy Ray, who, when you were talking about it, who I've been on around the world with, really. And when we were younger, we went to New Zealand and we'd flown, he's from California, I'm sure he'll be listening to this. So we flew via Los Angeles and he phoned a few friends, and then we had to fly from there down to New Zealand. And we'd barely had any sleep. We picked up the hire car. The people at the bed and breakfast, it was a farmhouse bed and breakfast, weren't there. So we just threw our bags in their driveway, left them, got into our fishing stuff and hit the river straight away. And then it reminded me of our last trip. We went to Spain and we went for trout, but we discovered barbel in the rivers and that was it. But it was a much more sedate trip as we've got a little bit older. And even at sort of, we thought, they should come on again about 6. Should we have a siesta about 4 o'clock? And we did that. And then we'd sort of bleary-eyed come out at 6 and fish through. And even that was really cool. And then we'd fish late. And we were in Catalonia and we'd have rabbit or whatever it was for dinner. It was just fantastic, the whole thing. Although the fishing hours were probably a little less than we've done in the past, enjoyment levels were equally as high. And it's funny how, and I talk a lot about it on these podcasts, that how the rhythm of these things changes as you get older as well. I guess you find that too, to a degree.
Definitely. And in a way, I've sort of found that a bit of a relief. When I first started fly fishing, I didn't come to it till quite late. I was about 24, 25, albeit I think the kind of gene had been there, sort of dormant. But I was completely obsessed. I was just every waking moment. My best mate always jokes about me just disappearing for hours when in the bathroom with the trout and salmon. Just sort of like I was absolutely obsessed by it. And actually, albeit it was great because it was exciting, it's nice to get a bit of balance back. And actually that filters through to the day's fishing. That if you stay out, you can do one midnight, but if you do 3 in a row, you're not going to enjoy the last 2 days. So actually, and do you know what? You don't catch any less fish. If you enjoy your breakfast and stop and have a lunch, and you only gain having that social time. You definitely don't catch any less fish because you approach it in a more calm. And, I remember when I first started fishing, trying to get out of the car without even taking my safety belt off because I was so eager to get on the river. Whereas now, I much prefer just to stop and have a cup of tea and just have a little bit think about what I'm doing when I get on the riverbank, just soaking it up. It's such a privilege to be able to do it. And particularly to be able to do it with friends. Do you know what I mean? You want to just sort of savor that and enjoy it rather than sort of running around like a headless chicken. So definitely that's one of the good things about getting older, I think. It's not as intense, but it's still very rich, the enjoyment. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah, fantastic. No, I love every aspect of it. I still shake with excitement when I go fishing. And if I do lose that, then I'm in trouble. I don't know. I doesn't feel anytime soon like it's going anywhere. So that's really cool from that point of view. But talking about trips and your trip to Scotland, that sort of, and we touched on my falling out of love with fly tying at the moment. Does that mean you prepare? That's part of that journey starting, isn't it? By tying flies for your trip. And do you do that? Are you sort of an avid fly dresser, tire, that you've been doing loads over this lockdown period?
Not really. I mean, I do enjoy tying flies, but not really for the sake of it. I will be tying flies for this trip rather than I like to kind of make sure I've got what I need. But I think that I did a trip to Koran probably about 10 years ago now, where when I was at the kind of peak of my enthusiasm, where I tied about 300 flies before I went. I've still got 290 of them. And, they've just sat there, a lot of them. So it's a kind of bit more needs must. And I've definitely got a limit. If I can't tie more than a dozen flies in a sitting, I just can't. I just get restless and have to do something else. So I enjoy tying my own, but I wouldn't do it for its own sake. Yeah.
And that's about 6 more than I'd tie when I sat down. I put something out on my social media yesterday or the day before, I can't remember now, about I'd got some flies from a friend and somebody had posted that they tied 6. That was their first task of the day. And yeah. I said, wow, they all look the same, because mine sort of take a route of their own. And so there might be 3, and then there's sort of, it goes off a little bit, and there might be a subtle change. Are you regimented 6 or 12 that will look identical, or do you sort of go down a Darwinian route a little bit and let them go how they want to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would describe my fly tying as very much impressionistic. Yeah, I mean, my mate Pete, another Pete, who I do these trips with, his are just absolutely perfect, But he's much more. His personality is more like that. He's the guy who'll keep the schedule for the trip written down. He's very flexible. We'll go off schedule, but we always know there's something to come back to. Do you know what I mean? So he's very organised like that, which we make quite a good pairing. Because I'm probably the one who said, "Come on, let's go to wherever in the first place." Do you know what I mean? And then he'll actually make it happen. And his fly tying is kind of really very, very kind of clean and crisp, and very, very effective flies. Whereas mine's a little bit more kind of, like you say, as the spirit takes me, kind of thing. Yeah.
Mine, I think that's a hangover from guide flies, and there's a hatch that was working, and that's the downside, I guess, if you only tie 3 that you want, and then 3 other ones, and there's a chance a bunch of those aren't going to work within that permutation. So I don't know if that's something to do with it, but impressionistic is fine by me. And I know you're equally at home, and you've been talking about the locks. I guess you're fishing. Are you going to fish are there rivers that you're going to fish when you go up there as well?
No, I don't think so, because my local fishing is river fishing, really. We've got the Bristol waters, and I tend to go up to the tanks maybe once or twice a year, maybe fish Blagden once a year. But I do most of my river fishing around here. So I find locks in wild places intoxicating. There's something about the heather and the gorse and the rock, and where the water meets the land, and it's something about drifting onto a shore which is just incredible. So, and I can't do that near to where I live, so I like to spend as much time as I can if I'm in somewhere like that doing that. So I don't tend to fish the rivers as much, but we will, like I said, we'll probably take in a river on the way up. Cool.
That's interesting. I guess from your point of view, you're the dream boat partner, being left-handed as well.
Well, I would be, apart from my main boat partner who's also left-handed, ironically. But over the years, our kind of catching each other has kind of dropped over the years. So now most of the time we're okay. And I'm not, considering how long I've been fishing, I'm a pretty crap caster really, but actually drifting from a boat is about as easy as it gets, because you've got the wind behind you and you're basically just dropping the flies in front of you. So and then stripping them like mad. So yeah, we tend to do all right, and we've been in some awful boats over the years. Some boats are almost kind of round. So we've kind of had to be fairly versatile. Yeah.
I was thinking about the left-handed thing as well, and then it made me think. Obviously, you being a designer and working with us with Fly Culture as our designer, and our artistic director Perry as well is left-handed. Is there something? Do you subscribe to this thing about the left side, or is it the right side that makes you left-handed? That makes it ties with an artistic side of your brain to be left-handed.
Well, you hear that, don't you? And my daughter Holly is also left-handed, and she's super creative. She's a really properly good artist. And but yet Pete, I'm not saying he's not artistic, but Pete, the guy I fish with, who's left-handed, is very much an administrator, organised, and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's probably some truth in it, but it's not a hard and fast rule.
Yeah, it just made me think about it then. I suddenly thought, right, you're left, and then it made me think of Perry and everything else. And I wondered if there might be something in that. But what I wanted to come on was the magazine, and I was absolutely thrilled and knew the first phone call I made when I was thinking about bringing the magazine. And as someone who is a designer, was it an interesting project for you? And also fun, I guess, to combine your passions.
Oh, look, Pete, it's the dream job, isn't it? It's just bringing, I love my work. I'm very privileged to have been able to, do it for 30 years, working for myself. And, I never get that kind of Monday morning, Sunday night feeling. I'm always up for it. So being able to kind of bring the design and the fly fishing together was just fantastic. I must admit, I was a little bit nervous because my audience would be basically a lot of my mates, and it would all be out there. So, but I'm so glad I sort of said yes and went with it, because I've really, really enjoyed it. It's been great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased you said yes as well. So thank you for that. And when we first spoke about bringing a magazine, how does your process go? And you'd agreed to come on board. Do the cogs immediately start turning for you, or do you like to look at the content and work from there, so you see it as is and then say, right, okay, this is how it'll be? Do you have an idea, or does it remain flexible and fluid?
Well, no, there is a method to putting Fly Culture together, but that's something that we kind of worked out early on. We looked at other publications that were not necessarily about fly fishing or fishing, but, kind of gold standard publications that were doing a similar thing, I guess, but in other areas, which was treating the content like it was something really precious, which it is. And there was already, everybody knows there's plenty of fishing magazines out that do the kind of normal magazine format really well. So there was no point really trying to go after that, because it's already been done. But within fly fishing, I think there was some space for something more considered. I always think of Fly Culture as a journal rather than a magazine. It's a collection of essays really, and bits of artwork. And, I just saw my job, and I still see my job now, as just presenting that as simply as I possibly can without getting in the way. Because the content's great, and it's just delivering that content in a way that people are going to be able to get to it and read it and just enjoy it and touch it with the lovely paper. That hasn't changed.
And we decided sort of on that, as you alluded to, a clean, unfussy look. As a designer, though, does that actually make it that process more difficult, in the sense of, and I know a word we talk all the time, obviously, that, you use the word overworking something. And is that something that you think about quite often when that process begins?
Partly is. I think I'm partly sort of trying to play to my strengths because, I've always been a kind of minimal designer. So, our kind of, me and my partner, our ethos has always been what's the least amount of marks we can make to convey the message in the strongest possible way. So that's always been the way we've approached it. So to be honest with you, I wouldn't probably be very successful at doing something that really swanky and flash and glossy, I think the term is. I could only bring to it my style, So and fortunately, I feel like it's the right fit. So it would be about keeping it kind of pretty minimal and clean, and then the bits that you do drop in then have a kind of precious quality to them. So that's how it started, and that's kind of how I approach design. So it makes sense that I did that with Fly Culture too.
Works really, really well, and that sort of I guess the vision was similarly shared from that point of view, that having something that was clean and let, as you rightly say, the articles and the photography speak for themselves. And, I remember some of the meetings we had where we looked at how to bring the magazine and the paper and having matte or gloss or whatever it may be. And they were fascinating parts of it. And it was a really interesting insight to learn how you look at things. And I've learned a lot about that. And for the listeners, it's a really, certainly from my standpoint, a great relationship that I know I can speak to you about anything and you'll tell me straight. And that's what I really enjoy about that aspect of it. And it is, how, so our listeners, I guess, get an insight into it, is that we put the magazine together, and Emma and I will look at articles, and Brett as well. We'll look at that. We'll look at photography, and we'll ensure that we have those pages, the 100 pages, as we always do, filled in. The rhythm of the magazine is really important to me as well. And I know to yourself how it actually reads. So how the articles go through, basically. And then when that's done, I send that to Jon. So I sort of placed stuff, and then that's when you sort of weave your magic, and that must be a really, I look forward to delivering and packaging it to you. I hope you similarly look forward to receiving it, because I guess you're seeing it in its very, very rawest form, aren't you?
Yeah, it reminds me of the first time you did that, Pete, on issue 1. You said, "Oh, do you mind just having a look at this? What is it? Can you give us a few tips?" And I was like, "Okay, looks like I'm going to get involved in this." So that was great. But yeah, I still get that buzz now when it arrives. It's brilliant, and it's like getting the magazine delivered. I guess you get to see what's going to be in it. You see what photographs there are. You see the potential. Then I skim read to see, okay, what are going to be the pull quotes that I bring out? Where can I do an illustration? And I'm in my mind, I'm sort of building it and bringing it all together. And it's very exciting. Yeah, it's really good. But I'm kind of right in that process at the minute with spring 2021. So yeah, that's great.
That one, it's funny how this works, isn't it? And somebody once asked me, I was a guest somewhere or other, and somebody said, "What have you got?" And I thought I couldn't remember, because I was sort of or in this case, I'm working on summer. So I'm halfway through summer at the moment, and sort of chasing articles there and thinking, right, does this work? Does that work? And it's really hard. And then when you send the finished design piece back to me, then I sit down and read it again. And it's really fun. And I'll say to Emma, "Yeah, he's pulled it off again." And it's lovely when you see the finished thing, because it's exciting then. And then, like you say, you get the double hit. And that's always, I don't know how you feel about it, that when it turns up, we physically unload it from the lorry, Emma and I. We put all the labels on, and there's a lot. And we do all of those. We hand pack every single one of them. And then I sit down and I have a quick flick through and send you a text and say, yep, it's looking great, looking absolutely fantastic. But then there's that very slight nervous thing where it goes out with people and you're waiting to hear how people have seen it and what they make of it. And do you feel similarly in that when it's hitting the readership?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, and all the more so because it's fly culture. I mean, as a designer, you're constantly kind of exposing something, aren't you, in a way that your creativity and opening yourself up to, people to kind of make a judgment on it. It's just part of the job. And, you've put your heart and soul into bringing that content together over the past few weeks, months. Do you know what I mean? It's been kind of your waking and sleeping day that's been, at the forefront of your mind. So obviously, there's a nervousness about how it'll be received, and similarly with the design. But I think because of the approach I take is, I've got a method. Really, it's mostly about the content. There's little flourishes and bits and pieces that I pop in, but which I really hope people enjoy. But it's about, okay, have I made a good job at actually presenting this content in a way that kind of honours the person who took the photo or wrote it? And I think that's the key thing. And there's nice challenges in that. I mean, obviously, if you get some photography that comes in that's absolutely fantastic off the blog, and it's just a case of dropping it in and working the type around it. But then sometimes because of the culture, fly culture, you're giving new guys and women a go at writing an article, and they may supply their own photographs. They're not professional photographers. It might be great pics, but you have to work a little bit harder with the design and in Photoshop just to really bring out the best in some of those pictures and show them in a way that really makes them look at their best. So I enjoy that challenge as well, to try and bring that together.
And it felt to me as though we found our identity pretty early on, and I'm proud that we've trodden our own path ever since. Does that feel that way to you as somebody who's micro looking at the design process and the identity of the magazine? Has it felt that way to you?
Yeah, I think so. I think it has. I mean, in a way, I don't normally say this because if I go do a presentation of, say, if I'm designing a new branding or something, I often say to Liz, I'm really pleased with what I'm showing. And if they don't like it, well, that, it's a shame. But actually, as long as I feel like I've done the best I can and I'm happy with it. But I think with fly culture, ultimately, because it's a commercial product and people are paying money for it, it is important that people really like it. So, that is an important response for me. I want people to like it and continue to want to pick it up, Yeah.
It's been interesting that you said a few moments ago about, we looked really more so at the independent publishing market space, as it were. And, people will say, publications, magazines, whatever they may be, are falling. It's a shrinking marketplace, but we, in our own small little way, seem to have bucked that. Have you been surprised how that has happened, and how I guess people may have felt early on, well, this is going to be a one or two hit wonder, and we're coming up 3 years soon. Have you been pleasantly surprised how it's played out and the feedback that you've had from people that you've met along the way?
I'd say yes and no. I mean, with you in the driving seat, it's going to get 100% energy. So if anything's going to succeed, then, it's got a really good fighting chance. I would say, I think with fly fishing, I mean, I suppose you could say the same with maybe cycling or something, but it's a very kind of aesthetic pastime. It's got its own aesthetic and it's quite a beautiful thing. Whether that's obviously the fish, a gorgeous wild brown trout, or like a Hampshire Avon Springer, or a sea trout from an Irish loch. I mean, they're just exquisite creatures, and you only really catch them in beautiful places. So most fly fishermen have got a kind of fairly finely tuned aesthetic and appreciation of that. So I think to be able to try and tap into that somehow. I mean, I'm not comparing like the design of fly culture with those beautiful things, but what I'm trying to say is to be able to offer those things up. You've got a willing audience already, and I think we're tapping into that aesthetic in terms of the places that we love to go, and the little details that we notice. I think it's about that, whether it's that time with your friends or a particular beer that you've enjoyed or whatever it is. And I think that the format of fly culture really, really suits that. That sort of slower, stopping to take time to notice and observe and enjoy. And there's, because we're fly fishermen, I think we're fairly like-minded. We enjoy those things. And therefore, I'm not entirely surprised. I don't think I've said to you before, it's always only going to have probably a limited market. But I think we've found it, and, and you're making a good job of kind of growing it.
It's really interesting, the parallels you draw about the beauty of the fish. And it makes me think, that's such a key thing, having someone designing the magazine who feels the same way you do about fishing. And I guess you could look at it a couple of ways, couldn't you? You could have somebody designing something that doesn't really know it, yet when somebody's heart's invested in it, I think that probably comes through too. And listening to you, about the beauty of wild brown trout, salmon, whatever it may be, that makes that process more complete to me as somebody listening to that as well.
Yeah, well, I definitely feel that. When I'm putting things on the page, it's not just a technical exercise. It's like, particularly if there are articles that relate to kind of where my passions are. Then we've had some on South Uist, and we had one on Shetland recently, and I do with all the articles, but particularly I want to be able to communicate what I'm feeling, with that. And there's a tension there because part of me is kind of, I can't get it out quick enough. But the other part of me is like, whoa, remember, we're going to keep this kind of minimal and cool and just let the pictures do the speaking and the writing do the speaking. So I'm kind of continually having this fight with myself just to kind of just pare back. And but I feel passionate about what I'm laying out, definitely.
Yeah, I think that comes across in by the truckload. And it sort of reminded me while you were saying that there was one of the pieces we had, and you got up at silly o'clock in the morning to tie, I think it was a band shrimp or something like that, so that you could photograph it and put it in with an article on salmon fishing. I think it was band shrimp.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah. Well, you see a gap, and then once you've seen that gap, you've got to fill it. So, and what's been really great, I mean, when I started off, I did my degree on a graphic design course. So I went there as an illustrator, because at school, the only thing I was really good at was sitting down, drawing a crushed Coke can and a knackered Converse All-Star, like you did in O-level art. And so I went off to uni thinking I was going to be an illustrator. I had a bit of a kind of road to Damascus experience then with graphic design. But this is the first time really in 35 years that I've had the chance to do some illustration again. I absolutely love it. So, and that's born out of, okay, there's a nice little gap there. There's a nice part of this story that could be illustrated, with an object or a little collection of objects or whatever. And it's probably my favourite bit. Once I've got the whole magazine laid out, is going in and just, as I call it with you, tuning it up and just making and dropping in the little illustrations, and it's brilliant. Yeah, I really, really love that bit.
I still think one of my favourites is a piece that accompanied Chad's Gamblers of La Tienda, and you did a beer bottle and drew a beer bottle top with fly culture on it, and that was really super cool.
Yeah. Actually, no, there was a little bit of Photoshop work on the drawing, but yeah, it's nice, if you can find one object that sort of draws you in to read the rest of the the writing, or maybe helps with that, a bit like a Paul quote does, catches your attention, then that. But then again, it's not over egging that. Do you know what I mean? It's picking and choosing that, and so that's what I aim to do anyway.
Cool.
What's been really nice in the last Fly Culture has been able to commission. I mean, we have loads of really good illustrators anyway, but Danny Jenkins, who's an illustrator here in Bristol, I've always loved his work, and been able to get him to. Well, actually, he asked to do some work for us because he'd seen Fly Culture, and that was a real privilege because he's great. So, yeah, it was great to be able to include some of his work.
Yeah, no, that was fantastic. That really accompanied Tim's mullet piece fantastically. So, yeah, it's great. And that's been, you keep the faith with everything, don't you? And then, like you say, you have people that you admire. I'm having articles come in from people around the world that I'm thinking, wow, that's, really impressive stuff. And for them to want to be involved with what we're doing is deeply humbling, but also makes you feel perhaps you may be doing something along the right lines, which is really pleasing. But let's move on a little bit now and talk. I was thinking about when you talked about your fishing and you said you came to fly fishing a little bit later. What was the story behind that? You said your mid-20s. How did that happen? And you said you had a dormant gene. How did that happen?
Well, I don't know if this happened for you, Pete, but a few of my friends who fish had an experience in their childhood where they had seen a fish in a river somewhere and something had clicked. For me, it was on the Devon Avon, I think, in Dartmoor, and I was on a family holiday and I looked into a culvert and there was a brown trout. I'm not even sure I knew it was a brown trout, but just holding in the current. And it was just magical. I don't know, something happened. And no fisher, no anglers in the family at all. So I didn't really have anyone to kind of help steer me to explore that. So it was kind of at a few false starts with coarse fishing, but it kind of sat dormant. And, I was in Bristol, so it was much more about going out to the pub and going to gigs and that kind of thing. So it kind of sat dormant till I met a mate of mine, Pete. Found out that he had grown up fly fishing. I mean, where he lived in Hexham, that's what all the kids did. They went fly fishing on the Tyne. They strapped their rods to their crossbars on their bikes and they went off. And literally, he went off with his mates, cycled over to the Border-esque and went sea trout fishing at night, with his rod strapped to his bike. So he grew up there. I found out that he did this and basically pestered him till he took me up to the tanks and taught me to fly fish, and then subsequently taught me to tie flies as well. So that's how it got going. Yeah, but I was completely green. I didn't have a clue, but I immediately knew this is my thing.
And it bit really deep, and the rest, I guess, is history. Do you have a favourite? You say you plan your road trips and you go to a lot of places. Do you have that one place that you thought, yeah, this is the one? I could. Do you have one that sort of sticks in your mind?
Yeah. Well, the thing that first comes to mind is the East Lynn. I've been talking about fishing glens and lochs, but actually that was early on in my kind of fishing career. I discovered the Lynn. You could go and fish there for free. One of the great things about being an adult or privileged adult, is having a car and enough money to be able to get yourself somewhere like Lynmouth, buy a ticket and go fishing for a day. I just couldn't quite believe it, and the Lynn's just an incredible river, and I don't know if maybe it's just in Devon, but it's almost in Somerset. It's so near to where I live that it just seems like another world. It's like the Rockies or something. And the first time I went there, I was just tackling up at the little car park above Vellacots and the overflow pool. And this local came up, walked up the steps there, with a grilse that must have been about 5 or 6 pounds and slapped it down on the roof of his Renault Clio van. And it was so fresh that this may just be my memory, but I seem to remember it not even kind of relaxing to fit the shape of the roof. It just sat there like a solid kind of seesaw bar of silver with a bluish sheen across it. And that just sealed it. I mean, it was just like that place is magical. And I've even got it in my will that my ashes will be scattered at Watersmeet just because I just love it there. It's brilliant. And the fishing's just great. Just always just fantastic to be there. So, yeah, in fact, I caught my first sea trout there of 3 weeks after Holly was born. I booked Myrtleberry, which is a house about halfway down the East Lynn. I think I put this in that piece that I wrote. But Liz has never quite forgiven me for that 3-week-old baby in a house with a generator for electricity. But it did have the best sea trout pool on the river, literally in the back garden. So I caught my first sea trout there with Holly in a kind of cradle on my front. Yeah, so that was like another really kind of special memory.
Awesome. It's funny you say about your ashes. It's funny you say about your ashes going at Watersmeet. I'm going to go on the tour. I'm just only hoping I get cremated.
Yeah. Well, it all goes back into the system, doesn't it, Pete?
Yeah, eventually. Yeah.
Biodegradable.
And so sea trout as well. And we were talking off mic, and I feel like I've known you for absolutely ages. And you said we first actually made contact via a forum, and you were asking about sea trout, and we'd got chatting there. And you mentioned them there. Is that sort of a fish that's always remained? I get the sense it is one that's remained special to you.
I think probably less so now than it was in the past. I mean, you can't do sea trout fishing in a half-hearted way. I mean, it's like in for a pound, in for a penny, in for a pound. And, ironically, it was the years when I was getting least sleep that I chose the part of the sport which would give me even less sleep because I needed to be back for kind of taking Jack to football on a Saturday morning. I spent the best part of 10 years driving back and forth to Christchurch to fish the clay pool, 2.25 hours each way for about 2 hours fishing every Friday night. And but you could go 4 or 5 trips without a fish, but when you got one, I mean, it's just the most amazing thing, isn't it? I mean, in the dark, and it's incredible. So I did about 10 years there, and then discovered the axe down in Devon, and fished there probably for another 10 years there, actually, maybe slightly less. But yeah, in both cases, stuff happened to the fisheries that kind of made it not quite worth the lack of sleep. Unfortunately, the axe has really suffered with farming runoff and issues like that. So the catches were going down, but on its day, it was a fantastic sea trout fishery. Yeah, really good. So now my sea trout fishing is limited to fishing on lochs where there might be sea trout, or I fish every year. I'll fish the bridge pool in Christchurch from the punt. Saw that on Mortimer Whitehouse a little while back, but I'll fish from the punt. But my favourite bit is getting into the water and then fishing down the run in the daylight with the tide running off and just down and across with some nymphs and wets. Just fantastic fun. I love that. And that gets me shaking, definitely. Yeah. Because you watch them jumping all day.
Yeah, lovely. I think I've been spoiled that my friend Ray, who I mentioned earlier, lives in Denmark, and I just love fishing in the sea for sea trout. I love fishing, the glacial lakes for them, and it's freezing cold. It's almost akin to steelheading in that sense, that you're fishing in freezing cold conditions. I usually go over November. I have been over earlier in the year as well, but it's usually not, and it is literally Baltic. And it spoilt me, I have to say, and I really, really enjoy it. And it's kind of like bass or mullet fishing, or more so bass fishing, but you're catching sea trout as a result. And that makes it deeply interesting to me. And yeah, I'm looking forward to when we can do that again, very much so. But you touched on the axe there and the conservation issues that's faced. And do you think anglers are starting to make a little bit more noise about these issues now, and be it social media that's allowing them to do that, or other means too? Do you sense there is that starting to happen in fishing?
Oh, without doubt, yeah. I mean, we've seen it in our own club. We got the Wild Trout Trust in to sort of do a river survey, and since that, there's been a continual kind of referencing to, large wooded debris, and how can we scour the gravels, and we when I joined the club, we were stocking fish which would pretty much be taken out the next weekend by poachers. It was a waste of time, but we now are very much focused on getting the environment as best as it can be for the trout and the grayling to reproduce and be self-sustaining, and we're catch and release. And I think, it does definitely feel like it's going that way. And, and there's less kind of adversity between the different river users as well. I think we've seen as anglers that, it can be a pain if you get canoeists come through your beat that you're fishing, but they're enjoying the river as well. And, it's much better that, we put up with that inconvenience in a way, because they're having to put up with us, and join forces against the real dangers, pollution and farm runoff, and, overflow from sewage works. And it's great to see wild swimming as well, and I think if we can all get on, and we'll be much stronger together in terms of fighting these things. So, it's difficult to tell on social media, really, isn't it? I mean, I'm kind of thinking in terms of fly fishing generally, you kind of follow who you follow. So you get you see it with politics, don't you? You kind of get the messages that you already believe in, but you kind of get that a little bit with fly fishing as well, because of who you follow, and you think it's a really dynamic young sport, but actually you're kind of rank and file season ticket holders at the Tanks or Blagdon. You wonder how they're faring out there, whether they're still there in the numbers. Well, I don't think they are in Bristol waters, because they're currently looking for someone else to take the fishing on. So you wonder what the reality is on the ground. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not sure social media gives you the whole picture, but I'd hope so. Certainly, the tide seems to be turning a little bit with salmon farms, and there's been some notable victories recently in terms of licenses not being granted and things. So you really hope so. I mean, it's such low-hanging fruit, isn't it? To fix the kind of runoff issue. Come on, just leave a margin around the field. It's not rocket science. Just don't, spread slurry before it's going to rain. Plough your field in the right direction. I mean, I'm not a farmer, but come on, surely we can do those things and prevent these massive kill-offs of fish in rivers like the Towie and the Tywey. And I just think, it feels like so much to do with the environment is out beyond of our control. Whereas those things, they feel like they're reachable, and anglers really should be at the forefront of that.
Yeah. It definitely feels to me as though that noise has turned up a little bit more, and long may that continue. And I hope that does, and this process continues to grow and the movement continues to grow. You mentioned about when you stayed on the Lynn and Holly had just been born, and Liz was down there with you, your wife, and you mentioned to me that she's started to become fly fishing curious as well, which is, are you super pleased? Have you super enjoyed those days you've had with her?
Yeah, I really am. Yeah, I mean, she's great company for a start, and I guess there's an element of I mean, she's quite a kind of strong spirit, is Liz, but I think there may be an element of if you can't beat them, join them. So I think our kids are both left home now, and it's nice to be able to do stuff together, and I think she quite fancied giving fly fishing a go. And then I took her again. I wrote about it in Fly Culture. Took her up to Cregennyn because I'd had a day with Pete there, and I mean, it's just stunning. I mean, it's just the most beautiful place, full of wild brown trout, which are actually quite willing. And I thought, okay, well, if I get her there, this will really seal the deal, because it's so beautiful. And there's a good chance she'll catch something. And she did. Caught half a dozen fish, and and then she wanted to go again. So so she booked herself some casting lessons with Dave Wiltshire. And I'm the kind of artistic one in the partnership. She's definitely the sporty one. I mean, I'm still a crap caster after years, like I said before, but she was into the backing after a couple of hours of tuition. She was putting out whole fly lines. So I think there's a lot of promise there. So, kitted her up for Christmas and got her own gear. And so we're looking forward we've got a boat booked in April on Wimberbull. I'm very much looking forward to kind of kicking things off down there. That'd be really good, yeah.
Nice, fantastic. That sounds a dream combination. And as someone who fishes with their wife too, that I absolutely love it. I think it's great fun. And, I can see both angles of it. But I think I'd rather have a partner that fished than didn't. And you may have asked me that 15 years ago, and I may have said, well, it's actually good to have interests that are sometimes different. But now, like you say, I think with our daughter not being at home, you grow closer. And I think for me, she's looking forward to the 1st of March as much as I am. And we'll be down there giving it a really, really good go. So describe to me, what would your perfect day on the water be?
Oh, golly. I think, okay, I might give you a couple.
Yeah.
So what I've been doing a lot recently is going up into the Welsh Lins with a bivvy bag and just wild camping, basically. And then just working my way around a few lins up there, Tivy Pools, or up on Barmouth. There are a couple of lakes right up in the mountains. So it'd be something that involved more than just fishing. So like a physical element of getting there, a bit of a survival element, with the bivvy bag and kind of cooking up, and then the fishing's sort of the icing on the cake, really. So I think a day up in a kind of upland Welsh Lynn would be fantastic. I'd love that. A bit of wild camping either end of it, or just we're going up to Orkney, God willing, at the beginning of June. We'll be coming back via a Sint, and fishing one of those with either up in Orkney, but the landscape in the Sint, I guess, is pretty dramatic. So drifting, with a backdrop of is it Solvian, the mountain up there, and with the mayfly hatch going on. I mean, that's going to be pretty special. But we did Coran for years in Ireland, and you're drifting 500 yards from the sea, 500 yards of river away from the sea, drifting into the rocks at the east end with McGillicuddy's Reeks ahead of you, the mountains, and Church Island with the old ancient derelict church to your left, and I mean across the shore of Church Island for sea trout. That's probably that's where it peaks, I think, for me. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Nice. Having spoken to Stuart about a Sint there, it just sounds like fishing heaven, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, I hope so. The only thing I'm slightly nervous about are the midges, obviously.
Yeah.
But we hopefully will be okay because it's a bit early on. Maybe more of a risk of snow than midges, but we're what the heck? Let's give it a go. Got midge nets. Yeah, got some midge repellent, so definitely give it a go.
Nice. So, if you could go anywhere, is there somewhere that is an itch you're desperate to, bucket list destination? Is there somewhere you would really love to visit, to cast a fly at something or other somewhere? Where do you think that would be?
P, I think, watching Liz kind of go through a phase now where she's working out what the next stage of her career is, and she's really kind of quite ambitious and focused, and she's getting a little bit of coaching and that kind of. And I've just I do fly culture, and I've got my clients, and I'm quite happily kind of almost bumbling along. It's just life's pretty good. So my fishing's fairly similar. I mean, if I went to New Zealand, great, I'd love to fish there, or if I went to Russia, right. But I get so much pleasure out of going, over the Severn Bridge and up into the Black Mountains or the Cambrians, I don't have a massive desire to kind of travel, particularly now where flying, there's kind of a pressure in terms of the environment and flying and all that kind of thing. I get so much pleasure out fishing kind of locally, as it were, that it's a bit of a boring answer, but I could spend the rest of my days working my way around Scotland and Ireland, definitely.
It's not that boring. I guessed you were going to say something along those sorts of lines and staying local. And that's been an interesting thing, hasn't it, from lockdown, that I get the sense that people, will get this, I want to travel, I want to go there. But I wonder if it has made people realise what they have on their doorstep. And I've always felt that about Devon. I'm hugely passionate about the trout there, and the trout are surprising if you know where to look. And it has pretty much everything I need. And I think probably last year and the year before, I barely fished anywhere else. I didn't need to, and it ticked those boxes. And also along with that appreciation of what's in your backyard, a simplicity to fishing that seems to be a trend that continually comes through to me, that people are carrying less stuff, fishing a bamboo rod or a glass rod, or I don't need this or I don't need that. Do you sense that too?
Yeah, I definitely think so. Yeah, and I think lockdown's just done that generally in life, hasn't it? I mean, we've had to simplify. We've had to take pleasure in toast, rye bread, toast and marmalade, or like first cup of tea of the day. I think once you've adjusted your expectation, you can get just as much pleasure out of those things than, the kind of, you get so wrapped up. I mean, I'm thinking about going back to kind of commuting down to my office in town, and you come back and then, you may be out 3 or 4 nights a week, and, it just doesn't stop. It keeps going. And actually it's one of the kind of, obviously the pandemic's been awful, but one of the kind of silver linings for me is that life's just become so much simpler. And I think it's, whether it's fishing or just life in general, I think that's not a bad thing, definitely.
Yeah, cool. Well, we've chatted, John, for over an hour now, and it's been fantastic catching up, as it always is. I know we were only on the phone the other day, but it's been lovely to get an insight from a team member of the magazine, but also your fishing history and your passions, and I hope that comes across. It certainly comes across in the magazine as well, but I hope it's of interest to our listeners to get a sense of the passion and love for fishing from the people behind the magazine that they put out. And whether it is the term passion project or not, I don't know that it is. It's something I felt I had to do, and I enjoy doing it. But it's been lovely to talk with you, as we often do, about the magazine and get your insight into it. So thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Oh, no worries. Thank you, Pete. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm sure I'll be on the phone to you soon anyway to bother you about something or other before too long. But thanks so much for taking the time. Everyone, this has been the Fly Culture Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this one too. And there are plenty more in the pipeline. We put these out on YouTube now as well. So if you'd like to watch John and I chatting away, you can do that. And if you enjoy it as well, perhaps you'd consider subscribing as well. But thanks everyone for listening. And there'll be plenty more from the Fly Culture Podcast very, very soon.
The Fly Culture Podcast is brought to you in association with Fly Culture, a quarterly print magazine. For more information, please visit flyculturemag.com. You can also find Fly Culture on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.